So I want you to think about your morning commute today.
Oh yeah, the daily grind.
Right. You probably walked out to your driveway or maybe down to the transit station and you turned a key or pushed a button. And you expected this machine to just obey you instantly.
Complete, unquestioning compliance. You push the pedal, it goes.
Exactly. But I want you to imagine, just for a second, replacing that button with a 1,200-pound living, breathing creature.
That is a terrifying thought for modern commuters, honestly.
It really is. A creature with its own anxieties, its own fierce loyalties, and a very real capacity for violent rebellion. For thousands of years, that wasn't some hypothetical thought experiment. That was just a Tuesday.
Yeah, it fundamentally changes how you interact with the world. I mean, when your primary mode of transportation or agriculture or warfare can literally just decide it doesn't like you today.
Right. And that tension, that exact dynamic, is what we are broadcasting about today. Welcome to our deep dive on Under the Hood.
Coming to you, as always, from the little station on Commercial Street in Atchison, Kansas.
Deep in the Chesterton Radio world. And I'm actually looking out the window of this old bookstore right now. The rain is tapping softly against the glass.
It's a perfect day for a long conversation, really. Hot coffee, rain.
It really is.
Yeah.
And the streets outside are full of, internal combustion engines. But right here on the table between us, we have this massive stack of sources. Classic radio dramas, epic poetry, literary thrillers, and even some mid-century comedies.
It is a wild mix of genres.
It is. But they are all anchored by one specific recurring ghost, I guess you could call it. The horse.
Yeah, the horse. I mean, we traded literal horsepower for engines over a century ago, right? But this animal just refuses to be relegated to a museum.
No, it completely haunts our literature and our audio dramas.
Yeah.
So today, we're not going to just, summarize old plots.
Right.
We really want to unpack the anatomy of this symbol.
We need to look at what it means. Freedom, mortality, sacrifice, greed. We're trying to understand what actually vanished from the human soul when the horse disappeared from our daily lives.
Exactly. So I want you, listening right now, to just pull up a chair here in the bookstore and listen to the rain with us. Because when you actually look under the hood of these stories, you realize how much we've lost touch with the physical world.
I really have.
So let's start with the absolute deepest roots in our stack today. We're going way back to the 9th century with G.K. Chesterton's epic poem, The Ballad of the White Horse.
Oh, this is such a foundational piece.
But before we even get to the horse itself, we really have to set the scene. We have to understand the sheer desperation of this setting.
Desperation is honestly almost too light a word for it. We are dealing with King Alfred of Wessex.
Right, the guy history eventually calls Alfred the Great.
Yeah, but when Chesterton's poem opens, there is absolutely nothing great about his situation. I mean, he is utterly broken, he's been driven from his throne, and he's hiding in the marshlands.
Specifically on the river island of Athelney, right?
Yes, hiding in the mud from the invading Danes.
And the way Chesterton describes these Danes, it's wild. He doesn't just describe them as a rival political faction wanting land. He paints them as this apocalyptic terror.
He calls them hornet heads.
Hornet heads, yes. They come from the sea in these misshapen, terrifying ships loaded with strange gold and fire. And they aren't just there to conquer. They are there to unmake reality.
Yeah, Chesterton calls them a Christless chivalry. I mean, they literally take the physical wooden crosses of the Christians and just chop them up for firewood.
It's a complete philosophical annihilation they're bringing to the shores of Britain.
And the sea imagery is really vital there, too, because the sea, in a lot of ancient literature, represents chaos, the unformed void.
Like they are agents of that void.
Exactly. They represent this heathen nihilism, this belief that ultimately everything is meaningless, so might makes right. Are gods that cry for blood and offer absolutely no moral architecture.
So Alfred is sitting in this muddy swamp. His lords are dead, his army is scattered, and he has to confront this overwhelming force of entropy.
Which is what makes his vision on that island so fascinating.
Oh, the vision. Yes. Because he doesn't see like a flaming chariot in the sky telling him to go conquer.
No, nothing that grandiose.
He looks at a tiny, illuminated manuscript, like a little picture in a book his mother showed him when he was a child. It's such an intimate, fragile thing compared to the heavy swords of the Danes.
And from this tiny picture, the Virgin Mary speaks to him.
But I always trip over her actual message here. Because, it is wildly pessimistic.
It really is the defining paradox of the entire epic.
She tells him, and I'm paraphrasing a bit, but she says, I tell you not for your comfort, save that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher.
Yeah. Not exactly a pep talk.
No. How is that supposed to motivate a king who has lost everything? It's like, hey, just so you know, it's going to get much, much worse. If I'm Alfred, I'm staying in the swamp.
Right, but that's because Chesterton is drawing this really sharp contrast between the motivation of the nihilist and the motivation of the builder.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, the Danes fight because they believe they are fated to win, right? They're driven by this appetite for destruction. But Mary is offering Alfred the ethic of civilization. She's saying, you do not fight because victory is guaranteed.
Oh, I see.
You fight because it is the right thing to do, even if you are destined to lose. That promise of endless, joyous struggle is what gives human life its dignity. It's a total rejection of fatalism.
Wow, so Alfred takes this incredibly bleak but somehow mobilizing prophecy, and he goes out to gather the remnants of his forces.
And Chesterton uses these chiefs he gathers to represent the DNA of early Britain.
Yeah, he gets Eldred, this massive, simple-hearted Saxon farmer who really just wants to tend his land.
And he finds Mark, a Roman from Italy.
Right, the guy who carries the memory of the old empire's discipline and order.
And finally Colin, a wild Celtic chieftain from the sacred tree. So you basically have agriculture, law, and primal spirituality coming together at the Battle of Ethandune.
And the battle itself is monumental, obviously. But the physical climax of the poem, and really where our core theme about the horse crystallizes today, happens in the aftermath.
Yes, it centers on the veil of the white horse.
And we should clarify, this isn't a metaphorical horse in a stable. It is a literal, massive geoglyph.
A huge figure of a horse carved right into the chalk of the hills in Oxfordshire.
Okay, but I need to stop you right there and push back on this.
Yeah.
Because this is where Chesterton's logic feels completely contradictory to me.
How so?
Well, the white horse is a pagan symbol. It was carved by ancient Britons centuries before Christianity even reached the island. And King Alfred just fought a massive bloody war to defend Christian civilization against pagan invaders.
Right.
So why on earth does he make it his royal duty to protect and maintain a giant pagan horse carved into the dirt?
I mean, it definitely seems like a contradiction until you really understand Chesterton's philosophy of tradition and maintenance.
I'm trying to wrap my head around it. The only way it makes sense to me is if I think about it like inheriting an incredibly beautiful, meticulously crafted house from someone of a totally different faith.
That's actually a great analogy.
You don't burn the house down just because the original architect didn't read the same holy book as you. You preserve it out of gratitude.
Gratitude for the human effort.
Right. You recognize the sheer human artistry, the physical labor it took to build something that outlasts a single human lifespan. But is he just keeping it around as a historical anchor?
Well, it is much more active than just keeping it around. It is the act of scouring.
Scouring?
Yeah. The chalk horse only remains white and visible if human beings continually go out and physically scrape away the overgrowth.
Oh, because nature will reclaim it.
Exactly. Chesterton writes that if left alone, the weeds, the fungus, the soft mosses will just creep in and erase it. The grass will unwind the toils of men.
So the weeds are the nihilism.
Precisely. Civilization is not a machine that you can build, turn on, and walk away from. The white horse represents the shared, continuous duty of mankind to hold back the dark.
That's powerful.
The pagan origins don't really matter to Alfred in that moment. What matters is that the horse represents human memory and human effort, pushing back against the encroaching chaos of the natural world.
It's a tradition that grows from ordinary life.
Yeah.
And it demands humility, right? Because you literally have to get on your knees in the dirt to scour the horse.
Absolutely.
That paints the horse as this grand geographical anchor of human civilization. It's really beautiful. But if Chesterton's horse is a symbol of our collective memory and our defiance of chaos, what happens when that symbol is brought to the literal edge of a cliff?
Yeah. We are shifting gears now.
We need to move from the epic scale of Wessex to the deeply personal, apocalyptic nightmare of the American Civil War. Let's open the file on Ambrose Bierce's short story, A Horseman in the Sky.
The tonal shift here is severe. I mean, we move from a king defending a nation to a single soldier making an impossible choice.
Right. We are in the autumn of 1861, and the setting is the rugged, heavily forested vertical terrain of Western Virginia.
And it's important to remember as we look at this that the Civil War tore families apart. We aren't looking at this to endorse any political side, but strictly to examine the human tragedy of it.
Exactly. The narrative facts of the Federal and Confederate divide here are just the backdrop for this intense personal nightmare. Our protagonist is Carter Drews, a young federal soldier.
And the geography of this story is everything. He is stationed at an extreme outpost, basically a cliff edge overlooking a really deep valley.
His regiment is secretly camped down in that valley, totally exposed if anyone were to look down from the ridge.
Yeah, but Carter Drews commits a massive crime. He falls asleep on duty.
Which, in the military context of the 1860s, sleeping on picket duty is punishable by death.
Yeah, it's a fatal mistake. And when he wakes up, he peers through the laurel bushes and sees something that seems to just defy reality.
Standing on the very edge of the dizzying cliff, sharply outlined against the sky, is a Confederate horseman.
And Bierce's description of this horse and rider is just burned into my brain.
It's incredible. He doesn't describe a sweaty, tired cavalry scout.
No, he describes an equestrian statue. He says the man sits with the absolute repose of a Grecian god.
The horse is perfectly still, its hooves gripping the very edge of the precipice. It looks monumental, mythic even.
Right, and Ambrose Bierce was a Union veteran himself. He fought at Shiloh and Chickamauga. He knew exactly what real cavalry looked like. But here, he elevates the horse and rider to this supernatural status.
But then that supernatural veneer shatters. Carter Drews looks closer through his sights, and through the lens of this brutal, fratricidal conflict, the tragedy snaps into focus.
Because the Confederate scout looking down into the valley, discovering the hidden troops, is Carter's own father.
It is the literal nightmare scenario of this Civil War. His father is a Virginian who stayed loyal to his state, and Carter went with the Union.
And Carter remembers his father's parting words when he left home, right?
Yeah, his father told him, whatever may occur, do what you conceive to be your duty.
And his duty right now is to protect his sleeping regiment in the valley below. If his father rides back and reports their position, hundreds of men will be slaughtered.
He has to fire his weapon.
But the psychological barrier of patricide is just too high. He cannot bring himself to put the crosshairs on his father's chest.
So he aims at the horse.
Which results in one of the most terrifying, breathtaking visuals in American literature. He pulls the trigger.
And Bierce shifts the perspective in the writing. We are suddenly down in the valley with a federal officer who happens to look up at the cliff at that exact moment.
And what the officer sees is a man on horseback riding down into the valley through the air.
Oh, it gives me chills. The horse doesn't just fall limply. Its motions are those of a wild gallop. Its hooves are striking empty space, trying to run on the air itself.
And the rider sits completely straight and upright, his long hair streaming upward like a plume. It is this slow-motion descent into the abyss until they crash into the trees below and die without an echo.
In Bierce's story, the horse elevates the man. It makes him look like a god against the sky. And because the horse makes him larger than life, the fall is a colossal, apocalyptic event.
The horse absorbs the violence of this human madness.
Exactly. We drag this majestic animal into our political failure, and we literally shoot it out from under our own fathers.
It's a heavy, heavy symbol.
But I want to contrast that immediately with another piece of literature from our stack. We found this in the intermission commentary of the radio broadcast. It's Katherine Anne Porter's Pale Horse, Pale Rider.
Okay, yes. We shift forward to World War I, and specifically to the 1918 influenza epidemic.
And we have to remember, the flu in 1918 wasn't just a bad cold. It was a biologically terrifying event.
It drowned people in their own fluids within hours. It was horrifying.
The story follows Miranda, a young woman who falls deeply in love with a soldier named Adam, only for both of them to be engulfed by the confusion of the war and the terrifying invisible spread of this disease.
And Miranda is consumed by the fever. She slips into these incredibly vivid, harrowing hallucinations, and the central motif of her delirium is the pale horse.
Straight from the book of Revelation. And I looked, and behold, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death.
Exactly. In Porter's narrative, the horse is entirely detached from the physical animal. It represents the inescapable force of nature.
It is the biological reality of mortality that just sweeps away human romance, military strategy, and youth.
Yeah, the pale horse isn't a victim here.
And this is where I'm fundamentally torn, and I really want you to weigh in on this. We have two completely opposed views of the horse in these apocalyptic settings.
Right.
In Bierce's story, the horse is the ultimate victim. It's a casualty of human conflict. But in Porter's story, the horse is the conflict. It is the terrifying, unstoppable force of nature coming to wipe us out.
It's a stark contrast.
So which of these do you think is the truer reflection of how our ancestors actually interacted with horses? Were they our helpless victims, or were they these terrifying forces we could barely survive?
I think the power of the horse symbol lies precisely in the fact that it was constantly fluctuating between both realities.
What do you mean?
Well, for most of human history, a horse was a massive, dangerous, powerful animal. I mean, if you approach a strange horse from behind, it can kill you with a single kick.
Right, that's true.
It represented the raw, untamed terror of the natural world. It was a force of nature. But simultaneously, once domesticated, broken, and forced into a cavalry charge or strapped to heavy artillery in the mud of a battlefield?
It became the ultimate tragic victim of human ambition.
Exactly. It's a mirror.
We ride them to feel like the Grecian gods Bierce described, but in doing so, we just expose them and ourselves to the abyss.
The horse amplifies our power, which means it also amplifies our tragedies.
That makes perfect sense. Well, let's leave the apocalyptic battlefields for a moment and look at the horse, where its mythic godhood is entirely stripped away.
Back to the practical.
Yes, where it is evaluated strictly on what it can do for human survival. We are heading to the American West, and we are opening the file on the classic radio drama, Gunsmoke.
Oh, this is a great pivot. We are shifting from grand tragedy to gritty utility. The working horse versus the commodities of greed.
This specific broadcast of Gunsmoke features U.S. Marshal Matt Dillon in Dodge City. But the central conflict doesn't revolve around a bank robbery or a shootout over cards.
No, it revolves around animal husbandry and conflicting value systems.
We meet an old man named Thatcher, and Thatcher has dedicated his life to breeding a new type of horse for the frontier. He calls it a quarter horse.
And the radio script is fascinatingly specific about the physical anatomy of this animal.
It really is. The other men in Dodge City are just mocking it. They say its rump is so high it looks like it's walking downhill.
Because it doesn't look like a traditional, elegant European riding horse.
Not at all.
But Thatcher defends his colt passionately. He describes a short head carried low, a body built close to the ground with bulging, massive muscles and short legs.
He says it looks like a bulldog standing next to a greyhound.
Right.
But why breed a horse to look like a bulldog?
Because of the demands of the frontier, specifically working cattle. A cowboy in the plains doesn't need a horse that can run beautifully in a straight line for 3 miles.
Right, they aren't racing on a track.
Exactly. He needs a horse that can accelerate from 0 to a full sprint in 3 seconds to cut off a stray steer. He needs it to stop on a dime and pivot.
So the quarter horse, which was named because it was unbeatable in a quarter-mile sprint, was basically an engine designed for rapid acceleration and utility.
Thatcher believes with his entire soul that this ugly, muscular little horse is the future of the working West.
But enter the antagonist, Ed Butler. Butler is a bully, obviously. But more importantly, he represents a totally different economic and value system.
He brings a purebred racing thoroughbred to Dodge City.
Right. It is tall, sleek, imported, and incredibly expensive. It is purely a status symbol, and Butler just needles and pushes old man Thatcher, constantly mocking the quarter horse until Thatcher snaps.
Pride takes over.
In a moment of absolute blinding pride in his working horse, Thatcher bets his entire ranch.
Which is valued at $4,000, his life savings, basically.
Everything he owns in the world, against Butler's thoroughbred in a 400-yard race down the main street.
It is a classic dramatic setup. But the tragedy hits before the race even begins.
Yeah. Thatcher, overwhelmed by the stress of the bet and the public humiliation, goes to the saloon and gets drunk.
His judgment becomes completely impaired. In a moment of despair, he draws a gun on Butler.
And Butler draws faster and shoots Thatcher dead. It is ruled self-defense.
And legally, because one of the betting parties is dead, Marshal Dillon steps in, holds the stakes, and declares the bet null and void.
But Thatcher's young grandson, Lonnie, steps out of the crowd. He is crying over his grandfather's body, but he demands to run the race anyway.
He wants to validate his grandfather's life's work.
He mounts this heavy-muscled, bulldog-looking quarter horse and lines up against Butler on this towering thoroughbred.
And the audio drama leverages its medium brilliantly here. You hear the contrast in the hoofbeats in the dirt. You hear the crowd roaring.
And because it's a short 400-yard sprint, the explosive acceleration of the quarter horse gives it the edge.
Lonnie beats the thoroughbred by half a length.
He takes the $4,000 from Matt Dillon, tells the marshal he's going to use the money to breed these sturdy frontier horses, and he leads the stud colt out of Dodge City as a thunderstorm builds in the background.
It is a profound story about legacy, survival, and the honest utilitarian heart of the frontier.
It really is. Now, I want to pivot sharply to contrast that gritty reality with a completely different audio landscape.
Oh, we are going across the pond.
Yes, we are moving from the dirt streets of Dodge City to a BBC Radio 4 adaptation of Dick Francis's thriller, Bone Crack.
We are entering the pristine, impossibly high-stakes world of British flat racing.
In Dodge City, a horse is worth its weight in utility. But in Bone Crack, the horses are multi-million-pound commodities.
They aren't partners, they're walking financial portfolios.
Exactly. We meet Neil Griffin, who is managing his father's highly prestigious training stable. And Neil's life is invaded by an international criminal megalomaniac named Enzo Rivera.
Rivera doesn't operate through petty insults in a saloon like Ed Butler did. He operates through calculated psychological terror.
He demands that Neil employ his wildly unqualified 18-year-old son, Alessandro, and make him the stable's star jockey.
Right. Rivera wants his son to ride their absolute best horse, Archangel, in the Derby. And if Neil refuses to play along, Rivera promises to systematically destroy the stable's assets.
And the quote-unquote assets are living creatures. Rivera isn't bluffing, the tactics are horrifying, and the radio production makes you feel every bit of it.
Rivera's thugs sneak into the stables at night.
And they don't just shoot the horses. That would be too quick. They use a strong tranquilizer, and then they apply extreme physical stress to shatter the horse's leg bones.
It's incredibly brutal. They smash the hock of a beloved older horse named Moonrock.
And a few days later, they break the leg of a beautiful horse named Indigo.
The sound design is crucial here. The sudden, violent disruption of the quiet stable, the distress of the animals. Dick Francis, who was a champion jockey himself, understood the sheer fragility of these incredibly expensive animals.
Yeah, and later in the story, Rivera elevates the violence even further. He hires a sniper to shoot a rival human jockey during a race.
But the sniper misses the human and kills the horse, Landcat, right on the heath at a full gallop.
This contrast drives me crazy. I have to point out the dark irony here.
Yeah, let's unpack that.
In Gunsmoke, the quarter horse is a working partner. It has intrinsic value, and because it shares the dirt and the danger with the human, there is a level of mutual respect.
But in Bone Crack, as the financial value of the horse skyrockets into the millions, its actual life becomes completely disposable.
To Enzo Rivera, shattering the leg of a magnificent animal isn't a tragedy. It's just a business negotiation tactic.
It's chilling.
So is the true nobility of the horse only visible when it's treated as a tool for survival rather than a lottery ticket?
I think you've diagnosed the exact pathology Dick Francis was exposing there. When an animal becomes purely a commodity, the human relationship with it is mediated entirely by greed.
Right.
The racehorse is kept in a gilded cage. It is pampered, yes, but its existence is terribly precarious. It is surrounded by thugs in the dark because it represents human wealth.
The frontier horse, conversely, was vital for human life. You don't break the leg of the horse that's carrying you across a desert.
Exactly. The value system dictates the morality of the interaction.
Okay, so we've looked at epic anchors of civilization, apocalyptic visions, and the bloody realities of economics. But as we dig deeper into our mid-century radio archives, we see the horse being used in a completely different way.
Not as a majestic myth or a financial asset.
Right, but as an incredibly effective, sometimes bizarre audio prop. We are moving into noir, comedy, and absurd escapism.
Let's begin with the noir genre. We have the classic radio broadcast of Ride the Pink Horse starring Robert Montgomery.
The setting is Taos, New Mexico during fiesta time. The atmosphere is thick with tourists, gaiety, and ancient local ceremonials.
But the title object, the pink horse, isn't a biological animal at all.
No, it's a piece of painted wood. It's a mechanical horse on an antique, hand-cranked merry-go-round called Tio Vivo.
And this carousel becomes the eerie, surreal centerpiece for a violent, desperate cycle of blackmail.
Our protagonist, a man named Gagan, has come to Taos to extort a war profiteer named Frank Hugo.
And the audio symbolism here is just masterful. Throughout the drama, you hear the mechanical, slightly out-of-tune music of the carousel and the rhythmic creaking of the wooden horses going round and round.
Gagan is this hard-boiled, cynical man seeking revenge for a murdered friend. He thinks he is the master of his own fate.
But reducing the majestic, untamable animal we've been talking about to a painted wooden figure bolted to a fixed track is the ultimate noir metaphor.
The horse has been completely sanitized, mechanized, and trapped.
And so is Gagan. He thinks he's making choices, but he is just riding a painted horse in a circle, trapped by his own trauma and greed. He is locked in a mechanical loop of violence that he literally cannot escape.
It's a brilliant subversion of the free-roaming horse of the American West. But radio didn't just use the horse for dark metaphors. It also used it for comedy.
Specifically by subverting the traditional dynamic between master and beast.
We see this perfectly in an episode of the Jack Benny program. Jack Benny is trying to pick a winner for the Hollywood Park Gold Cup.
He's consulting with his valet, Rochester, and they are debating the merits of horses with these grand names. Texas Sandman, challenge me.
And a horse that was scratched from the race named Busher.
The comedy relies entirely on reversing the expected roles. Jack Benny, the human, is portrayed as neurotic, incompetent, and deeply insecure.
The horses, meanwhile, are discussed as if they are high society elites with busy schedules and personal agency.
Rochester jokes about a race where a horse took so long the jockey starved to death.
And Jack leans completely into the absurdity. In a dream sequence, he goes over to talk to the scratched horse, Busher, as if she's a socialite he bumped into at a cocktail party.
It's hilarious.
He literally says, "Hello, Busher, old girl. You hurt your little footsie, didn't you? Didn't I see you somewhere this summer? Wasn't it a Cary Grant swimming pool?"
He addresses the horse as a peer. But if we really want to examine the comic subversion of the human-animal dynamic, we have to look at the CBS Radio Mystery Theater episode, straight from the horse's mouth.
This might be my favorite source in the whole stack. We meet a man named Hubert Purley.
Hubert is a bookkeeper for the Haskins Machine Screws Nuts and Bolts Company.
He is the ultimate mid-century corporate drone. His life is entirely gray. He is terrified of his boss. He is constantly henpecked by his wife, Beatrice, and he is mocked relentlessly by his mother-in-law, Bertie.
He is a man who has been entirely defeated by modern mechanized life.
So one afternoon, a more adventurous coworker convinces Hubert to skip out and go to a high society horse auction, just to watch the wealthy spend their money.
Hubert is totally out of his depth. In a moment of pure accidental panic, he makes a gesture, and the auctioneer takes it as a bid.
Hubert accidentally buys lot 333 for $850, which is money he absolutely does not have. He thinks he's accidentally bought a racehorse.
But he hasn't. He has bought Mervyn.
And Mervyn is a stable pony. But Mervyn isn't just a pony. Mervyn can talk.
And crucially, Mervyn is not some magical, ethereal, Tolkien-esque creature. He speaks with the voice of a street-smart, deeply pragmatic New Yorker who just happens to have hooves.
Hubert is terrified and hides Mervyn in his garage in Astoria, Queens. Mervyn, feeling slightly guilty about the financial strain he's caused, decides to help Hubert out.
Mervyn explains that because he hangs out in the stables with the thoroughbreds, he knows exactly who is going to win.
Right, the inside scoop.
He offers Hubert a 7-horse parlay at the track that is mathematically guaranteed to make him a millionaire.
Mervyn gives him the first few winners. Hide and Go Seek Me, Princess Handmaiden, and tells him to go to the paddock and ask a horse named Laughing Gently for the rest of the picks.
So Hubert takes his last $2, goes to the track, and starts winning.
He turns $2 into 20, 20 into hundreds, hundreds into a little over 1,000.
But by the 4th race, his human neurosis completely overwhelms him.
He looks at the $1,000, panics at the idea of losing it, and just loses his nerve. He stops betting.
He goes home, completely abandoning the millionaire parlay.
And when he gets back to the garage in Queens, Mervyn is gone.
Hubert tracks him down a few days later. Mervyn has taken a job pulling a red and yellow hansom cab in Central Park.
Hubert tries to apologize, but Mervyn cuts him off. Mervyn basically says, "Look, kid, horses and humans just don't mix. We gave you the keys to the kingdom, and you choked because you're afraid."
Mervyn realized that Hubert lacked the baseline courage to embrace the extraordinary.
I am struggling to connect the dots here, though.
What do you mean?
I look at King Alfred scouring the epic chalk horse to save civilization, and then I look at Hubert Purley getting yelled at by a pony in Central Park. How do these connect? What is mid-century radio actually doing with this symbol?
It's a very sharp social critique disguised as light, absurd comedy. Think about Hubert's life. He works at a machine screw factory. He lives in a cramped suburban house.
He is entirely disconnected from the natural world.
From physical labor, from anything primal. In these mid-century stories, the horse is used as a stand-in for the grounded, practical common sense that urbanized humans had lost.
So Mervyn is actually the smartest, most well-adjusted character in the story.
Without a doubt, the humans are anxious, greedy, and trapped by social expectations. The horse is clear-eyed, rational, and brave.
The comedy works because the listener instinctively recognizes that the talking animal is far more sane than the human accountant.
It reminds the audience of a simpler, more direct engagement with reality that modern bureaucracy has smothered.
That brings us inevitably to the final and perhaps most defining aspect of our deep dive today. It's the concept of taming.
Yes, the human-animal bond.
When humans and horses interact, there is always a negotiation of power. And we have two stories in our stack that show the radically different consequences of how we approach a spirit that is meant to be free.
Let's look at the darker side first, with a story called The Horse That Wasn't for Sale.
This narrative centers around a magnificent, terrifying stallion named Stargazer. Stargazer is owned by a woman named Christine Runyon, but the horse is universally described by the professional horseman in the story as a mad killer.
Stargazer is a horse that absolutely refuses to be ridden. He isn't just stubborn, he is violently opposed to human domination.
If you try to force him into submission, he will fight, throw you, and attempt to destroy you.
And the tragedy of the story is driven entirely by male ego.
Yeah.
The horseman who encounters Stargazer cannot accept that an animal exists in the world that they cannot psychologically and physically break.
A younger man named Alan Carlin attempts to ride him, ignoring all warnings, purely because his pride dictates that no horse can best him, and he is thrown and terribly injured.
But the ego doesn't stop there. An older man, Sam Friat, sees this and decides he has to prove that he still possesses the mastery of his youth.
Against all advice, in a deeply misguided attempt to subjugate nature, old Sam takes Stargazer for one last ride into the setting sun.
The result is fatal. Old Sam is killed by the horse.
The story operates as a stark, unforgiving warning. Stargazer is not a villain. He is the inherent, untamable power of the wild.
When humanity approaches that power armed only with ego, attempting to break a wild creature merely to stroke human vanity rather than trying to understand it, the natural world strikes back, and the result is death.
It's a tragedy of dominance. You try to treat a living spirit like a machine, you can just muscle into compliance and it breaks you. But then you flip the record over and you have national velvet.
This is the absolute antithesis of the Stargazer story.
Indeed. It is a story of partnership rather than domination. We have a young girl, Velvet Brown, who acquires a seemingly unmanageable horse, a piebald, in a village raffle for a single shilling.
And this piebald is wild in its own way. It refuses to be contained. It has a habit of jumping out of every enclosure, casually sailing over 5-foot stone gates, just for the sheer joy of the jump.
It is a massive, powerful animal.
But Velvet's approach is entirely different from the man in the Stargazer story. She doesn't approach the piebald with a whip, a set of spurs, and a desire to dominate.
She watches him jump the stone wall and realizes he doesn't need to be broken. He doesn't even really need to be taught. He just needs someone who believes in his inherent capacity.
She looks at this wild animal and says, I'd ride him right into history.
And she approaches him with empathy. She forms a bond based on mutual joy.
And the culmination of that empathy is entering him in the Grand National, the most grueling steeplechase in the world.
In Stargazer, the human demands submission and is destroyed. In National Velvet, the human offers a willing spiritual partnership.
She guides his wildness rather than crushing it, and together, the human and the horse elevate each other into legend.
When you lay it all out like this, from King Alfred pulling weeds off a chalk monument in the 9th century, to the horrific fall of the Horseman in Virginia, to Velvet's piebald flying over a hedge, it really makes you mourn what we've replaced them with.
It does.
We started this deep dive talking about pushing a button to start a car. What do you think is fundamentally missing from our modern mechanized lives now that the horse is gone from the streets?
If we synthesize all the literature and audio we've discussed today, I believe what we have lost is the daily, humbling practice of physical negotiation.
Physical negotiation.
Yeah. Horsepower in the 19th century meant a flesh and blood companion. It was an animal with a mind of its own, capable of profound terror, capable of incredible loyalty, and entirely capable of throwing you into a ditch if you pushed it too far.
When you rode a horse, you weren't just operating a vehicle. You were engaged in a continuous nonverbal dialogue with another living spirit.
You had to earn its cooperation every single morning. You couldn't just take it for granted.
Precisely. Today, we turn keys in ignitions. We demand total, immediate mechanical compliance. If the car doesn't start, we assume it's a broken machine and we take it to a mechanic.
But if a horse refused to move, it was a relationship problem. You had to ask yourself, is it hurt? Is it scared? Have I betrayed its trust?
We have lost that daily reminder that we share this planet with other wills, other consciousnesses that must be respected and partnered with, not just operated.
That brings us right back to where we started, looking out the window of this bookstore in Atchison at a street full of parked cars.
I want you, listening to this right now, to think about the media you consume. Long after most of us have stopped writing, Long after the stables in our cities were torn down and converted into concrete parking garages, why does the sound of galloping hooves on an old radio broadcast still make our pulse race?
Why do we still instinctively dread the pale horse of disease, respect the utilitarian muscle of the quarter horse, mourn the broken bones of the thoroughbred, and cheer for the piebald jumping into history?
I think it's because the horse remains the most perfect mirror for the human soul we've ever found. We know that we are capable of being deeply disciplined, fiercely loyal, and incredibly noble.
But at our core, beneath the societal saddle and the bureaucratic reins, there's a wild, untamable spark that refuses to be entirely broken by the modern world.
And maybe when we hear those hooves coming out of the radio speaker, we are just listening to the sound of our own unbridled hearts.
It is a profound thought, and one that resonates deeply with everything Chesterton tried to teach us about gratitude and the ordinary wonders of everyday life.
If you have enjoyed untangling these threads today, we invite you to continue the exploration. There is a vast, rich world of classic radio, literature, history, and deeply thoughtful conversation waiting for you throughout the Chesterton radio world.
Dive into the archives. Let the old audio dramas play. Look deep under the hood of our shared human history.
If you enjoy programming that takes the time to look for the deeper meaning in the static, we highly encourage you to support the station so we can keep the lights on and the microphones hot.
But for now, from the warm glow of the little station on Commercial Street, thank you for sitting in the rain with us.
Keep the volume up and keep your mind open. We'll talk to you next time.